Hey, this is Covenant Fellowship's Community Group Fellowship Series. The goal of the series is to highlight our need for fellowship and to help lead us into meaningful and effective fellowship with one another. I do hope this series serves your community group and serves you in your personal walk with Christ. Before we get started on the material in fellowship, I just want to start by doing two things. First, I want to thank you. Thank you for your faithfulness to the Lord, for your commitment to community, and for your forbearance through this COVID season. During this time, many people have experienced fear and anxiety. Many have experienced financial hardship. And some are perhaps more annoyed or frustrated than they are fearful or anxious. But through it all, you, the members of Covenant Fellowship, have pressed forward and you've remained committed. And I just want to thank you for that. It's been a season of testing for all of us. The second thing I want to do is simply to recognize the challenges that face us in this season as we talk about fellowship as a topic. Some of you may be wondering, how can we press into fellowship when we're just staring at one another on screens? If we can't even be together, can we really grow and experience true fellowship? And I want to answer that first in this way, and then with the rest of the series. First, no one is saying that these circumstances are ideal. Honestly, I can't wait until I don't have to carry a mask anymore. I can't wait until I can shake hands or hug and be with people, look at them face to face, share meals with people, enjoy food after meetings with people again, restore fellowship to what it used to be. Yet, and this is important, the follower of Christ presses through these disappointments and these obstacles as we continue to prioritize what's important to God. We prioritize fellowshipping with others regardless of the venue and regardless of the obstacles because it matters so much to our own spiritual health and just as importantly to the spiritual health of others. And so with that said, let's just jump right into the first topic here in our series. God has a way of using flood family moves to demonstrate my need for others. When we moved from Little Rock to Westchester, I had just broken my shoulder. I had a house full of boxes, an empty truck sitting on the curb, and it needed to be filled, but I couldn't move a box. I couldn't load the empty truck. I couldn't unload it once we arrived here in Westchester. We had a wonderful group of friends, dear friends in Little Rock, that helped us load that truck without me picking up a box. And then when we arrived here in Westchester, we arrived to a wonderful family of strangers who helped unload our truck and move us into our first home here. But that's just one flood family move. After our year at the pastor's college, we were moving again to Westchester into our current home to settle where we are now. And on our way up our steep driveway with our very full truck, the truck got stuck. Now, I don't mean stuck like it stalled and we couldn't get it started. That's easy enough. I mean the hitch, because of the slope of the driveway and the weight of the truck, the hitch actually buried itself into my blacktop. It was an inch deep, so I couldn't move the truck forward and I couldn't move the truck backward. It was buried in my driveway. And so I didn't know what to do. I brought some friends over and they brought a couple 2-ton jacks. They jacked up my back tires and I had to roll fast as I could down the driveway at the expense, I might add, of one of those 2-ton jacks. In both cases, I really desperately needed help. It reminds me of Ecclesiastes 4. Ecclesiastes 4, 9-12 says this, that two are better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. The truth is, in my moves, my need was very obvious. Times when our perspective, though, is the problem instead of our broken shoulder. Times when our heart issues are the problem instead of a buried hitch on a moving truck. Those are not quite as obvious. During those kinds of times, the onlooking world may see what appears to be a very healthy and stable person, never seeing the personal, emotional, or spiritual needs that we have. Or even worse, and maybe more frequently, we may miss our own challenges and our own need, press on, thinking that we're fine the whole time, not realizing our need for help. 1 Corinthians 12, and you're familiar with this. 1 Corinthians 12 tells us we are all parts of one body, and we cannot say that we have no need for one another. We're all designed by God to need one another under the headship of Christ. So what is that need? What do we need from one another? Friends, we need fellowship. The word in the original language is a Greek word, koinonia, and it means sharing together. It means partnership. And one of my favorite translations of this word is participation with one another. It indicates a depth of commitment to one another. When we're really in koinonia, one verse from 1 Corinthians 12 rings so true. Verse 26 says this, "If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together." Our need for genuine fellowship does not depend upon a certain personality or a certain type of situation. It doesn't depend upon being extroverted or introverted. It doesn't depend on whether we can be in person or on Zoom, looking at one another through screens. If you are human, if you are a Christian, you are designed to need others. It's just that simple. And there's two things. There's an exchange that happens. First, there's something we give in fellowship. We give grace. God uses people as a main instrument to give His grace to those that He loves. And yes, that means God uses you to give grace to those in your sphere of friends, in your community group, in Bible studies you may attend. When you plug into community, when you commit to a group like your community group that you're in right now, when you are positioned to give the grace God has already given you, then you are positioned to be an instrument in God's hands. And yes, it's a fair question when you're thinking about going to community group. Well, what will I get out of community group tonight? That's a fair question. But friends, let me encourage you to ask the other very fair question. What will I give in community group tonight? What will others receive through me at community group tonight? Your community group and fellowship is not just an opportunity for you to receive, it's an opportunity for you to invest and to give. And it's not arrogant to think that you have something to give. It's just acknowledging that this is how God has designed His body to function. And don't sell God short by believing you've got nothing to give. He's given you His grace, and He's given it to you to give to others. But you remember I talked about that exchange where we not only give, but something happens in return. We do receive. And very few believers would deny the fact that we need grace from God. We know we fall short, and we know that our only hope to being restored to God is that grace would come through Jesus Christ. But let me remind you, grace comes most frequently through human vehicles. It comes through those that look over us, our pastors. It comes through those that we serve, whether it's people we lead in community group or in Bible study or a neighbor or even children, but it comes through us as well. And it comes through others, the people in that community group. And we want to make sure that we're positioned in that group, in our fellowship, to be recipients of God's grace. You see, a life committed to fellowship, it puts us in a stream. It puts us in a fountain. It puts us under the spigot so that when we're thirsty, the water of God's grace can pour over us. It can pour over us through other people. When we're in fellowship, 1 Thessalonians 5 tells us we receive encouragement. Hebrews 3 tells us we receive much needed correction and exhortation. Colossians 3 tells us we receive compassion. 1 Corinthians 12 tells us we receive help. And Ecclesiastes 4, as I've already read, tells us we receive companionship. When we are in fellowship, we have someone who can see our blind spots, those things that we may not even see in ourselves. And then they can come alongside when we need help, when we need support, when we need encouragement, when we need correction. Both in Romans 12 and Ephesians 4, Paul tells us that we are members of one another. And this lesson is not intended to spread guilt. I'm not trying somehow to coerce you toward community. This responsibility of fellowship is simply built into the Christian life. It's not whether or not we're called to it. That's established. The scriptures are clear. The question that remains is whether or not we will enter into what God has called us to. Will we live a life committed to dependence upon one another, to giving and receiving the grace that He has in store for us? Genuine Christian fellowship is a gift that keeps on giving to us. It is a life-giving source of grace that intertwines spiritual growth with community. And because God has designed it this way, it's worth the investment, no matter what the cost and no matter what the obstacles. I pray you have a great discussion with one another. God bless you guys.